What do you mean you haven't watched the movie? No, hey, no, listen. Just watching Gene Kelly Singing in the Rain doesn't count. Okay, well, listen, I know the movie is called Singing in the Rain, but the movie is about so much more than just singing in the rain. Okay, fine. I will show you. Ladies and gentlemen, Singing in the Rain, summarized in 10 seconds or less.
The time has come. Feature lip sync for your life. And don't it up.
Welcome to Teacup for One. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and welcome to week 2 of the Great Movie Marathon, a magical journey through the movies as we watch our way through the films that made up one of the greatest Disney attractions of all time, the Great Movie Ride. Great Movie Ride, fun fact. The show building for the Great Movie Ride was modeled after the famous Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, but unlike most buildings in the Disney parks, this one was not constructed using forced perspective. In fact, the entire building was built to scale using the original blueprints from the 1920s, creating a theater facade that was identical to the Grauman's Chinese Theater as it existed back in the golden age of Hollywood. The building was home to the Great Movie Ride for almost 30 years before making way for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Now, even though the interior was completely gutted and rebuilt for the new attraction, the exterior remains almost identical to the way it was back when Disney's MGM/Hollywood Studios opened back in 1989. Minus the giant neon sign. In our last episode, we entered the world of Hollywood musicals with the casually misogynistic Busby Berkeley classic Footlight Parade. And today, the fun continues. Hit it, tour guide Matt. And coming up ahead is one of the most famous of all dance sequences. Why, it's Gene Kelly in the 1952 musical classic Singin' in the Rain. So no surprises here. The Great Movie Ride decided to immortalize Singin' in the Rain's most famous sequence. Gene Kelly singing in the rain. In the rain. Now, if we just want to look at this sequence alone, there is a lot that we can unpack, just in terms of fun facts and pieces of trivia. We could talk about the classic urban legend that the rain was actually watered down milk, an urban legend which has since been debunked. We could talk about the fact that Gene Kelly directed and shot this sequence while battling a fever of over 100 degrees. We could talk about the fact that Gene Kelly himself personally approved his animatronic. But what I want to talk about is the fact that Singin' in the Rain is a movie that really has nothing to do with singing in the rain. The film was commissioned by MGM Studios as a vehicle for showcasing Arthur Freed songs, and so the writing team of Camden and Green were tasked with writing an entire film around the title Singin' in the Rain, because Singin' in the Rain was one of Arthur Freed's most popular songs. It's kind of like when a writing team whose name escapes me and I didn't do the research on decided to take a bunch of ABBA songs and write a musical around them, and then they gave us Mamma Mia. Oh my god, Singin' in the Rain is basically the 1950s version of Mamma Mia. Well, except Singin' in the Rain is a cinematic masterpiece and Mamma Mia is Mamma Mia. Since the movie was to be suggested by the song Singin' in the Rain, Camden and Green knew that at some point in their movie they had to have a character singing in the rain. Not much to build a film around. But then Camden and Green started to look at the time period in which these songs were actually written, which was the late 1920s and early 1930s, also known as the time period in which the Talkie Revolution was sweeping Hollywood. And keep in mind that Singin' in the Rain was written and shot in the early 1950s, so all of this was still relatively recent history. The 1930s were still fresh in everyone's mind, but they were far enough away that people were getting nostalgic for the time period, kind of like how now everyone wishes it was still the 1980s and we love Stranger Things and whatever. But more than that, since this was recent history, everyone remembered how the Talkies shook up Hollywood. So, it was a formula for success. Yes, they managed to get a scene with somebody singing in the rain, but beyond that, they managed to write a film that beautifully captured a historic moment in cinematic history. I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but Singin' in the Rain is a brilliant choice to follow up Footlight Parade in the Great Movie Ride, because both films deal with the death of silent films and look at how artists had to adapt to those changes in the industry. Even though Footlight Parade is basically just a weird, drug-induced fantasy, the story is about theater artists who are having to adapt to a changing entertainment landscape where talking actors in pictures are threatening the jobs of talking actors on stage. Singin' in the Rain shows us how that change affected silent film stars, and even though the movie is a satire, it's still a pretty thorough look at why some film actors were able to transition into talking pictures and why some actors weren't. And a lot of that revolves around the movie's most criminally underrated character, Lina Lamont.
What's wrong with the way I talk? What's the big idea? Am I dumb or something?
When people think of Singin' in the Rain, their minds usually go to three people: Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds. And rightly so. The stuff that those three do in this film is incredible. In fact, pretty much everything about this movie is close to perfect. But I think Lina Lamont's character and Jean Hagen's performance of Lina Lamont deserve way more credit than they usually get. I mean, yes, Lina has a funny voice, and yes, Lina is a horrible person, but at the same time, Lina Lamont is Singin' in the Rain's most interesting character, and that's because the way that she acts throughout this movie isn't entirely unjustified. Let's just look at Lina's character compared to Don. Don Lockwood is a character who's meant to represent a very small margin of actors who were able to successfully make the transition from silent pictures into the talkies. Now, these are actors like John Barrymore, who started his career on the stage before becoming a silent film actor, so talking, no problem for him. Or Laurel and Hardy, whose entire comedy act was based in physical comedy, so for them, they were able to just layer on talking as an added tool to their act. In the case of Don Lockwood, he's established as having a background in vaudeville, and so that meshes perfectly with all the musicals that they're starting to make once the talkies roll out. In short, Don has the skills and the attitude to be able to make the transition into talking pictures. Lina doesn't. Lina represents the silent film stars who built their career in silent pictures and didn't know any other way of working, and in fact, had their entire process uprooted by the talking films. These were actors like Mary Pickford, who said that adding sound to movies would be like putting lipstick on the Venus de Milo, or Clara Bow. Clara Bow was Hollywood's original it girl. Like, literally, she was labeled Hollywood's it girl. And she went on record saying that she hated rehearsals, and she claimed, "Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it." She basically was Lina Lamont. She wasn't an actor, but she had a huge personality and a spontaneity that translated to silent film beautifully. She also had a thick Brooklyn accent that people felt came off as more aggressive than the on-screen persona that she was known for. And she also hated talking pictures. She said that they were stiff and limiting, and that talking caused actors to lose their cuteness. So again, yeah, basically Clara Bow equals Lina Lamont. Now, the most famous stories of silent film actors losing work as the talkies became more popular usually revolve around their voices not matching their looks, and we will get to that. But the sheer mechanics of creating a talking film meant that actors had to change everything about their process. I think it's a common misconception that silent film actors were untalented. It's something they even make fun of in Singin' in the Rain.
I mean, they don't talk, they don't act, they just make a lot of dumb show. Well, you know. Like that.
And can I just say, get off your high horse, Kathy Sheldon. What are you, like 18? But silent film acting required the ability to communicate emotion using only facial expressions and to essentially improvise captivating, spontaneous performances in the moment. So basically, it was an entirely different skill set from what was required of talking pictures. It wasn't untalented work. It was just work that required a talent that didn't mesh well with talking pictures. And I think all of that is summarized perfectly in the scene when the studio is trying out new methods for recording sound, and it pushes Lina to just having an outburst and crying out,
Everybody's picking on me.
And yes, Lina is a diva. But that's not what this outburst is about. She's very clearly overwhelmed by everything that's going on, and of course she's overwhelmed. Silent film stars rarely, if ever, had to memorize dialogue and action. They would usually just show up to set, and then they would be prompted by the director behind the camera telling them what to do in the moment. Hence Clara Bow saying, "Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it." Next, silent film actors were usually extremely physical. They were used to having complete physical freedom in the scenes, and all of a sudden they were being tied down. literally, by clunky sound equipment and being asked to remain conscious of where the microphone was while they were still trying to stay present and act a scene. And that's probably what Clara meant when she said that she found talkies stiff and limiting. So Lina went from a working style where rehearsal was virtually non-existent and direction was spontaneous to a working style where she had to memorize lines, she had to memorize blocking, she had to memorize where the microphones were and adjust her blocking accordingly, all while adhering to strict vocal coaching and trying to act the scene at the same time. And then, of course, there's her voice.
And I can't stand him.
And I can't stand him.
Lina's voice is one of the most memorable and comedic parts of the film because it really plays into the Hollywood myth that silent film actors had voices that weren't suitable for talkies. And this is really a topic that merits its own video entirely. But based on my labor-intensive Wikipedia research, the voice issue had less to do with the actual quality of the actors' voices, and more often than not, it was an issue of a language barrier or an accent. If we want to talk about a silent film actor whose career was ended because of a funny-sounding voice, the only real candidate I was able to find was John Gilbert, and even that one's a little bit of a stretch. John Gilbert was one of the most famous romantic leads in silent pictures, and there are a ton of urban legends about his first on-screen appearance in a talkie being met with laughter from the audience because he had a squeaky voice. Now, the squeaky voice rumors have since been debunked, but the part about the audiences laughing at his first talkie debut apparently are true. A ton of the early talkies were met with laughter from audiences just because of how bad and awkward a lot of the dialogue was. This is even parodied in Singing in the Rain, the way that Don Lockwood goes off script and just decides to say, "I love you, I love you, I love you." That was a direct parody of John Gilbert.
I love you. I've told you that 100 times this week. I love you.
And I told you not to tell me that again.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
So all of these careers were changing and in some cases ending as a result of the circumstances surrounding a relatively young industry having to rebuild from scratch and rediscovering exactly what filmmaking was. But bringing it back to Lina Lamont, I think she's a great example of how these changes affected actors on a personal level. When we first meet Lina, she's being constantly silenced by the studio. And I mean literally silenced. They won't let her speak in public, and when she asks why, they shamelessly say it's because she's a beautiful girl with an ugly voice. Her job is to be seen and not heard. And I don't think I need to point out that there is a lot to unpack there just in looking at how women are treated in the entertainment industry, but it speaks for itself. Unlike Lina. But here's the thing. Even though Lina is a terrible person, she still puts in the work, and she takes her job very seriously. When she says she wants to talk to her fans, she's willing to compromise. She's willing to work with the studio heads. She says, if you're afraid that I'm going to say something out of line and sound stupid, then just write me a speech.
I could memorize it.
And when you think about her line,
Well, I can't make love to a bush.
yes, it's hilarious, but it's also showing us that she cares about acting. She wants to stay present in the scene with her scene partner, and she doesn't want to look ridiculous by refocusing all of her energy into a spot that has nothing to do with the scene. And that's the ongoing thing that we see with Lina. Whenever she's working, she is legitimately trying her best. When it comes to working with Miss Dinsmore, she is putting in the work to try to readjust her speech and to find those round vowels.
Can't.
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 And I can't stand them.
But the really sad thing is that no matter how much personal improvement she makes, it's still not up to standard for what's required for a good performance. That's even more clear towards the end of the film when she's singing Would You, which is probably my favorite Lina moment in the entire movie. You can just tell that she has put in so much work as a non-singer, but it's still not good enough. And she knows it's not good enough. And you can just see in the eyes that it's a massive blow to her pride. And I personally read this as the moment when Lina realizes that her career is over. And her realizing that her career is over is a lot bigger than just a Hollywood diva being worried that she's not going to have attention anymore. No, no, no. This is a self-made, unmarried woman in the 1920s who's facing the threat of permanent unemployment because all of her skills and talents are going to be outdated. And this is the moment where I just need to throw some love towards Jean Hagen. She understands all sides of Lina's struggles and her motivations. And on top of that, she's able to pull off the over-the-top silent film melodrama, she's able to pull off the wacky character comedy, and she's grounding all of that with an extremely intelligent, nuanced understanding of Lina as a person. So the really ironic takeaway here is that Jean Hagen is the best actor in Singin' in the Rain. Anyway, friends, this concludes yet another episode of Teacup 4-1 and the second episode of the Great Movie Marathon. Now, let me know today in the comment section down below, who is your favorite performer in Singin' in the Rain? And if you haven't seen Singin' in the Rain, what are you waiting for? And also, if you want to be the first to know when I upload the next episode of the Great Movie Marathon, or you want to hear me talk about other things like Shakespeare, Funkos, or sometimes cats, usually Disney, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. If you haven't subscribed already, you got another chance coming right now. It's super easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the T Cup for 1. Go away.